This conference will now be recorded.
And I'm sharing my screen as well. Okay, so looks like the recording has started. And can somebody please confirm if you guys are able to see my screen?
Yes, Piyush.
Okay, perfect. Right. And I would request everyone to please keep yourself muted so that nobody should feel that disturbance. And if you guys have any questions, so the best practice would be always raise your hand, right? And then whenever like possible, I can ask you guys whatever queries you have. Okay. Right. So, okay, I'm about to get started. So, Shiba, like, yeah, quickly tell me what's your question.
Cypress interview question, and I wanted to learn JavaScript in where I can understand the logic and solve if they give any problem. Because the
I'm not
inter
sure, Shiba, if I'm understanding your voice correctly. I guess you are the same person whose voice was kind of breaking yesterday as well. I'm not sure, like, but somehow your voice is not at all clear actually. Or what you can do is like after this session, you can possibly ping me personally, or you can post on the channel, and somebody will definitely answer a question. But somehow I'm not able to hear your voice properly. Okay, so yeah, so let us get started now. So we'll talk about JavaScript numbers, right? So I'll move to VS Code. So this is the project that we created yesterday. It is a blank project, right? So I've shown you yesterday how do we install Cypress, right? So and the moment we run this particular command for the very first time, npx cypress open, it automatically creates this folder structure. But in case if you are working in your office, right, this folder structure will automatically be there for you, right? There'll be a lot of scripts, a lot of files. So here I'm teaching you everything from scratch, but in your office, let's say, right, so everything is automatically there. What you have to do is you have to fix existing issues or maybe create new test cases and all, right? For now we are going to learn JavaScript, and for that what I'll be doing is inside Cypress folder, I'll be clicking on this particular folder, which is going to create a new folder. Right, I can write JavaScript underscore code. So I'll be writing all my JavaScript code inside it, right? Okay. And for now, I'll create one file called, let's say, to numbers.js. Any JavaScript file, very important thing to understand, always ends with JavaScript.js extension. Okay. So the moment I select this, you see this JavaScript is written over here. It means I'm looking at a JavaScript file. And suppose if it is a TypeScript file, then it should end with .ts extension. So we are not covering TypeScript, but we are covering JavaScript for now. Okay, so let us talk about numbers. So in JavaScript, if we talk about numbers, all of them are can be represented as numbers. For example, 50, maybe 7, maybe a decimal point number, for example, something like this, right? I can even have another number like this. I can have negative numbers, or maybe I can have something like 666.8 something, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is like JavaScript has something called as a number type, number. So all of these numbers can be represented by one type in JavaScript, right, which is called as number, right? And it can contain positive numbers, it can also include negative numbers, right? And it can also have whole numbers, means pure numbers without any fractional part. Okay, and then it can also contain decimal numbers. So let's say if you are coming from Java background, right? So for integers we have an integer data type, and for floating point numbers or decimal point numbers we have another data type. But in JavaScript we have one type that represents both the whole numbers as well as fractional numbers, right? So this is something that is very important to understand, right? And I can write my code in VS Code, and I can, for a quick demonstration, I can even open google.com, I can right click, and I can do inspect. And inside this console, I can type my JavaScript code. Now you might wonder, should I write my JavaScript code here or should I use VS Code? In your office work, you'll be always using this VS Code. Why? Because we can save this particular file. But if we talk about browser console, we can try out the code that you just want to try out. We don't want to save this code. For example, I just want to quickly try out. For example, let's say what is say 15 multiplied by 5, right? I just want to have like a calculator or something. In that case, I can run my JavaScript code here. But if I want to save something so that I can use it maybe in future, in that case I should store my code here, right? And yeah, one thing that is important and it is very handy thing is like select file and autosave, so that if you are making some changes, you don't have to manually do this control save every time. I'll show you. If I remove this autosave functionality, now if I'm typing something, right, so you can type a number or anything, and if you see this white dot, what is the meaning of this white dot? It simply means I have made some modification to this file which is not yet saved. I'll have to make a save, otherwise I cannot even close this file, and uh, VS Code is going to tell me, do you want to save the changes or not? Save, don't save, or cancel. So in my case, I usually like to go with this autosave functionality. So I'll be sharing with you some best practices, especially with VS Code, that is going to make your life a lot easier. Okay, so this is about numbers, right? And JavaScript can store infinite amount of precision, right? What is it? I'll show you. So again, I can do, if you see, this is one number. It has what? How many digits? It has got 16 digits. And the moment I cross 17 digits, right, JavaScript actually trims or removes all of these digits. So if I remove one, and now if I hit enter, now you see, so these are what? 16 digits. So what I'm trying to say is, like, till 16 digits, JavaScript remembers the precision. But the moment I actually cross the 16 digits, JavaScript loses the precision. So I won't say this is like an issue with JavaScript, because very rarely you'll be requiring these many decimal places. But for majority of cases, 99.9% times, this should not cause an issue, right? But this is something that you should be aware of, right? So this is the maximum size. And suppose if I'm typing a lot of code here, right, and how do I want to clear it? How can I do? I can simply click on this button, which is what? Clear console. It is simply going to clear everything out, right? Which is like a handy shortcut. I can also do something like this. Let's say I have written 2 plus 2 here. It has given me this output. Now I want to clear the console. So rather than clicking on this, there's one more option. I can simply type clear. And one thing to understand, that any JavaScript function has to end with these parentheses. If I'll remove these parentheses, I'll not get an error, but JavaScript will simply tell me that, okay, I know about this clear function, but since you are not using the parentheses, I'm not executing it. So what's the point? It's of no use actually writing the function like this. So always remember, always, whenever you're calling any Cypress or any JavaScript method, always use these parentheses. Then only we can execute it. And it also shows console was cleared, right? So, and one more thing that I want to teach you, and that is spacing doesn't matter inside your code. For example, whether I write spacing here or I can write spaces here. For example, if I type something like this, 4/2, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm actually dividing 2 by 4, and the answer is 2. I can also do something like this, 4. I can do this, these many spaces, and then I can do something like this. But, and I see I get the same output, but this code is looking very weird actually, very difficult and hard to read. So always remember, it can take any amount of spacing, but it is always better to use proper spacing, something like this, or maybe one space is enough, right? Of course, you can use as many spaces as you want, but this is a lot better. And yeah, you can use console as a calculator. You can do even big amount of calculations actually inside your browser console. Okay, and we have something called as a remainder operator, which is what? And yeah, and whenever I use these double slashes, it means I'm telling JavaScript to ignore whatever I'm writing, because this is not a valid JavaScript code. This is a simple English line that I want my JavaScript file to ignore. So in that case, I can simply use these 2 forward slashes, and you see the color is changed to green. It means only this particular part is going to be executed inside this file, and this particular line is going to be completely ignored by the JavaScript compiler. Okay, right? So what I was talking about, the remainder operator. So what is the remainder operator and how do I use it? It is simply this percentage sign, right? What is the meaning of this remainder operator? It is very simple. So I can tell you, suppose if I'm dividing 10 percentage 3, it means what is the remainder if I'm dividing 10 by 3? So 10 divided by 3 is what? It is actually 3. Sorry, not 3. It is actually 1 as the remainder. That is, I'm getting 1 as the output. I'm not yet press enter. So that is why it is slightly grayed out. But the moment I'll hit enter, now you see it is no longer grayed out. So this is the output. And you see this arrow is pointing right. It means this is the code that I have executed. And if you see this is an arrow which is pointing left, it means this is the return value of the code that I have executed here. Okay, so this is right arrow and this is left arrow. Okay, and then we have something called as exponentiation operator, again, which is very important. I'll write it for you. Exponentiation. Sorry if I'm not writing the correct spelling, that's okay. exponentiation. I think it is the one. Yeah. So exponential operator is what? It is 2 stars. How do I use it? Suppose I want to do something like 2 to the power 3 or 2 cube or maybe 4 cube or 5 cube. How can I do in JavaScript? I can simply write like this: 2 star star 3. This is how I can use the exponentiation operator. So if you see, I'm using one space here and one space here. So it is looking a lot cleaner. I could have removed the spacing, right? But now my code is little cluttered actually and little hard to read. So I think one spacing is good enough, right? But it is completely your call. But this is my choice actually, right? So this is read as 2 to the power 3 or 4 to the power 2, which is what? 16, right? So this is how we can actually do cubes and squares. And why I'm teaching you all this? Because in real Cypress programming, you'll be required to do all of these stuff. And if your foundation is clear, it is going to be very simple for you. Okay. And then we have some very important values in JavaScript, which is what? NaN and infinity. Infinity is used not very frequently, but NaN is something that is used very frequently, right? So we'll be talking about NaN. What does NaN stands for? It stands for not a number. And one thing that you should be remembering is the first N is capitalized and the second N is also capitalized. Okay, so what is NaN? It is basically a numeric value that represents something that is not a number in JavaScript. I can show you a very simple example that will make things very simpler for you. For now, I have so much of code here, so I can simply clear the console by clicking on this button. And suppose if I try to divide 0 by 0, what should happen? I get this not a number. Right. So not a number is not an error. Like in mathematics, we have something called as if we try to divide anything by zero, we usually get an output as infinite or infinity. But in JavaScript, if we try to divide zero by zero, we get NaN. And suppose if I try to add something to NaN, for example, if I'll try to add 5 to NaN, again I'll get this NaN. Similar to if I try to add something to infinity, the output that I get is infinity. Right? So remember, first and last letters are capitalized. Okay, and this is NaN is not an error in JavaScript. It is not a number and it is not an error. Some people might confuse that this is an error. No, this is not an error. This is a numeric value actually. And how do I get infinity in JavaScript? Again, it is very simple. If I try to divide something by 0, but this part should not be 0. If it is 0, I get NaN. But if it is non-zero, this numerator part and the denominator part is 0, then I get the output as infinity. Okay.
So
So
where we use this NaN in our JavaScript?
yeah, so this NaN is something that is very important. Suppose if I'm trying to fetch something from the DB or maybe from an API call, we might get this value. That is where I should have this solid knowledge about NaN. So we'll be covering some more examples throughout our Cypress course, wherein it will be a lot clearer to you guys what is NaN and how do we actually use it.
Like
Okay,
it's a text value?
it is a numeric value, but it does not represent any error. It is simply a text value. Okay,
It is a
so
text value.
I would say it is a text value. It is actually a numeric value,
But
which
if it is not a number, then how can it be a numeric value?
no, I'm trying to say that it is not a number. It means, okay, I'll show you. So if I'll come here into Google, right, and what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to divide 5 by 0. So if I try to divide 5, let's say by 0, right, I should get some output, right? In this case, I get infinity. Now, infinity is something that is not a number, right? So similarly, if I try to divide something by 0, like this, then again I get the output as NaN. Right. So this is something that you'll actually understand. So again, as I was telling you guys yesterday, learning is not linear. I'll be teaching you some concepts that you may not understand at this particular moment, but I'm just telling you why, so that you can remember something for the future. And then when I'll teach you again in future, and you have some basic foundation already cleared, that is when your learning will actually develop. So don't worry if you're not able to understand each and everything. That is absolutely normal, and nobody can understand each and everything in a way, structured way. Okay, so let us move on. And now we are going to learn something that is most fundamental thing in JavaScript. That is declaring and creating variables. So how do I create variables in JavaScript? I would request everyone, if somebody is not muted, please keep yourself muted. Okay. So how do we create variables in JavaScript? There are three ways to create variables in JavaScript. We can use let, we can use const, and then we can use var. These are the three keywords using which I can create variables in JavaScript. Okay, let, const, and var. And how do I use it? It is very simple. What is the basic syntax? I'll write it. So the basic syntax is use let space variable name. It can be any variable name. Okay, and then you use the equal to, which is the assignment operator, and then whatever value that you want to pass. So this is the basic syntax, and it holds true for const. It also holds true for var also, right? For example, I can do something like this: let some name equal to, I can post any value, say, okay, I'm calling it name, so I can give it my name, which is Piyush. Okay, so this is how I can create a variable name. In this case, I'm actually creating a variable called some name, and I'm assigning this particular value to this variable called some name, and it is taking a small memory inside your computer, inside your RAM. Okay, and notice that I'm using camel casing convention. Now, what is camel casing convention? So this is a best practice in JavaScript. What do I mean by camel casing? If I'm using two words or basically two words, so the first word will always start with the lowercase. So if you notice, this S is in small case, and all the subsequent words will start with a capital letter, so that it becomes easier to read, right? I could have written it like this also, some name, right? But it is very hard to read actually, that these are actually two separate words. So in order to make it very clear, I can always use this as a lower camel casing convention. And this is something that everybody across the globe, we all use this as a camel casing convention. Another example I can use, for example, I want to, let's say I'm having some hens, and I can do something like this, num of hens. Now it is becoming very clear. So this is starting with lowercase, and all the subsequent words is going to start with upper camel case, right? So this is how we can create variables. And then I'm going to talk about some operators as well. For example, unary operator. You maybe if you're from Java background or something, you might have seen something like this. For example, let's say I have a variable called score, right? And I'm doing something like this: score equal to score plus one. So what is happening is, I'm actually, whatever is the value of the score, I'm adding one to it, and then whatever is the result of this operation, I'm assigning it back to square, right? And I can even write it like this: square plus equal to 1. So this is a short way of writing this part. Now, this is also correct and this is also correct. But for beginners, they usually like to go with this one because it is more simpler. But for people who are advanced and more professional, they usually like to go with this syntax. And it simply means score equal to score plus 1. This is how it is read. Okay, and what do I mean by unary operator? Unary operator means it has got only one side. For example, in this particular case, this is like a binary operator. Why? This plus is a binary operator. Why? Because it has something on the left and something on the right. So when we do a plus b, so this plus is actually a binary operator. Why? Because it is acting upon two operands. This is my first operand, this is my second operand. Okay, so this is my binary operator. You might have heard something, or you might have seen something like this, counter plus plus, right? Or maybe in Java or JavaScript, or you might have seen something like this, minus minus count, right? This plus plus or this minus minus is actually called as a unary operator. What do I mean by unary operator? It simply means it has got only one operand. In this case, this plus plus has got only one operand, either on the left or either on the right, right? But it will never have two operands, just like this plus, which has one operand on the left and one operand on the left. So that is why it is called as a unary operator. Unary means one. So this is also a unary operator. Why? Because it has only one operand, either on the left or either on the right. It does not have anything on the left, but it has something on the right. So that is why that is called as a unary operator. Okay, so I can give you a very simple example. I can do something like this. Let's say let counter equal to 0. Okay, so using this particular syntax, I'm creating a variable called counter using the let keyword, and I'm assigning it a value of 0. Okay, and it is going to take a very small space in your RAM. Okay, so and then afterwards what I can do is I can do something like this: counter plus plus. Okay, I can write it here so that it becomes more simpler for you. So I'll go to this browser console and I'll create this variable here. Okay, And now if I'll remove it, so I've created a variable called counter, and now if I do counter plus plus, and now if I'll check the value of counter, see the value of counter is now 1. Okay, so what is the meaning? If I'll do counter plus plus again like this, the value of counter is now what? See, counter is now 2, right? So what I'm trying to do is using this unary operator plus plus, I'm actually incrementing the value of this counter by 1 every time. So it is simply read as counter equal to counter plus 1. So this is like a short way of writing counter equal to counter plus 1. It is very, very simple. Similarly, I can also do counter minus minus, and it is going to decrement the value of this counter variable by 1. Right, if it is sounding little complicated, you can simply use like this, counter equal to counter minus 1, and then if you simply use counter, it is showing the updated value of counter, which is 0. So this is same as this. So now it is totally your call. You can go with this also, nobody is stopping you, but this is a little more advanced actually, but this is more beginner friendly. So as a beginner, you may want to go with this approach, but once your concepts are more clear with regular practice, then eventually you want to move on from this to this. Okay, so this was an example of unary operator. Next, I'm going to talk about let, var, and const. So let is something I've already shown you. This is how we create a variable using let. Now I'm going to show you how do we use const, and what is const basically. When I say const, it means I'm talking about a constant variable. How do I create a constant variable? I can show you like this. Const, same syntax. Instead of let, I'll use const. I'll pass a variable name. I'll use the assignment operator, which is equal to, and then I'll pass any value. So in this case, I can use something like this. Const, I'm creating a variable called hence, and I'm assigning the value of 4. Now if you see, I'm having an uneven spacing here, which is looking a little awkward, right? So I can simply remove this space, right? And now this code is looking a lot cleaner. Now, when should I use const versus when should I use let? So as a rule of thumb, we should always use const variable. Why? Because we want to try to restrict changing variables as much as possible to avoid issues or maybe potential bugs. Okay, now in the case of const, I'm assuming that this hence variable is never going to change. But if I want to, let's say, create a variable that I think it may change its value sometime in the future, I can use this let. For example, as of now, I'm having this variable called some name equal to Piyush, and I can change this variable value, let's say, to this name, right? So what I'm doing is, initially this variable was holding this value. You can think of this variable like a box which has this value Piyush. So what I'm doing this, in this particular line, I'm taking out this value of Piyush from this box, and I'm entering this new value, which is Pooja, into this particular box. So variable is like a box which holds a value, right? So in this case, I can change the value, but in the case of const, const stands for constant. Now, as constant itself means I cannot change the value. So if I'll try to change the value from hence equal to 5, JavaScript will not be happy, and it is going to throw an error. So this is not allowed. So if I'll simply do this, copy, and I'll paste it here. See, I'm getting this error, assignment to constant variable. So JavaScript is not at all happy when I'm trying to change the value of constant variable. Right now, you might be wondering, can you give me a real-time example of const? Yes, it is very simple. For example, if I want to create a variable called year, so I can give it a constant. For example, let's say const year equal to 1973. Right, so this is a year variable that holds this fixed value of 1973, and it is not going to change. And even if I try to change it, I will get an error, which is something I'm looking for. So can I do something like this? Year equal to year plus 1. No, this is not allowed. Why? Because this is actually a constant, and I cannot change the value of constant variable. Okay, so I hope this particular part is now clear. And let me give you some real life scenarios on when should I use this constant variable. Okay, so in mathematics, maybe when you were a kid, you might have heard of this particular variable called pi, which which has this value 3.14 something, right? And this value is something that never changes, right? So what is the value? 3.1416 something, right? So this is the value that never changes. And if you want to calculate the radius of circle, right, then it is what? And you want to calculate the circumference of the circle, then it is something like 2 pi r, right? So this is something that you can go with const. You can of course use let, nobody is stopping you, but ideally you should not use let. Why? Because this is a fixed value, this is never going to change. So ideally, you should use const. and try to use const variable as much as possible, and only use let when you think that your variable name is going to change. Okay, so one more example of const is what, let's say I do something like this, const days in week. Again, I'm using lower camel case, first word small case and all subsequent words in camel case, right? So let's say this. So days in a week is always going to be a fixed number, right? We have 7 days in a week. So this always should be a constant. We can never use 8 or 9 value here, right? In that case, I should go with this const, right? So this is where we can actually use const. And now finally, I'm going to talk about something that is called as var. So in older tutorials or maybe in some of the older YouTube videos or something, you might see this variable creation using var. But this is something that we should never use. So I'll write it for you. Never ever use var keyword to create variables. Why? Because this is an older way to create variables, and this is something that is not at all recommended by JavaScript. It has got a lot of limitations, and JavaScript clearly tells that you should never use it. Okay, so but still, how do I create it? That you should be aware of. Same syntax that we use. So we use something like what? This. So instead of let, I'll go with var. I'll pass the variable name equal to some value. So how can I use? Simply use this. For example, var trip distance equal to, let's say, 7.4, right? Of course I can create a variable like this, but it has got some challenges. If I start teaching you now, you'll not be able to understand. So it has something related to scoping, it has something related to global object that you will not be able to understand at this particular moment of time. That is why for now, just understand that we should never ever use var, and you will never see this var keyword in your real project world. Okay, so but something that you should be aware of. And where, as I was telling you, it is an older way of creating the variables, and you will hear something like this, ES6 or ES 2015. So whenever you hear this ES6 or ES 2015, it means we are talking about modern JavaScript. So in 2015, JavaScript underwent a lot of changes, and a lot of basically stuff was added into JavaScript. So especially things like let and const, they were added in 2015, almost 10 years back. So still it is called as modern JavaScript because this is something that is extremely important. And before let and const, where was the only way this where was the only way to declare variables. But especially after this let and const, you should never use var. Okay, so this is about let, var, and const. Now, time for a very quick exercise. I'm going to share something very interesting. So if I'll clear this console, let me create a variable, right? So let's say const wind underscore speed. So this is the name of my variable, and I'm assigning it a value of 76. Okay, now I'm trying to do something like this, wind underscore speed plus equal to 5 with this spacing, of course. Now, can you tell me what is an issue with this code and what is the value of wind underscore speed? So if I do something like this, okay, you are getting this output here, right? But suppose if I do something like this, wind underscore speed, if I do simply minus minus, what is the final value? It is very simple. Initially, the value is 76, and what I'm trying to do is plus equal to means I'm adding 5 to this variable and storing it back inside the same variable. So it is same as wind speed equal to wind speed plus 5. And then if I do something like wind speed minus minus, it means I'm trying to add, not add, I'm trying to subtract 1 from it. So final output should be what? It is very simple.
75.
It is 80. Why? Because initially it is no longer 76 now. I've actually added 5, right? And now I'm subtracting 1 from it. Getting? So you should do a little bit of practice, and that is how you start really enjoying JavaScript. It is very, very simple language. Unlike Java, that is a little complicated, specifically for beginners. Now, so this is about this variable. Now, I really want to ask you guys if you can spot any minor issue with this code. There's a small issue, very small issue with this code. Can anyone find out what is that issue in this particular piece of code? For a beginner, it might be a little tough, but it is very simple actually. So the only issue, which is like a cosmetic issue here, is what? I'm using this underscore. Of course, underscore is allowed, but in JavaScript, how do we create variables? As I was telling you, we always use lower camel case convention. Lower camel case convention. How do I create a variable in this case? It should not be wind underscore speed. Ideally, it should be what? Wind speed. This is how I should create a variable in JavaScript. First word lowercase and all the subsequent words in camel case. Right. And why I'm repeating these kind of things? Because repetition is the mother of all learning. If you think just by hearing something once will make you understand, no. You'll maybe hear it once and you'll forget it tomorrow. Right. But with repetition, that is how you'll actually reinforce the concepts. Okay. So this is how we can create the variables. Right. And then I'm talking about variable naming rules, which is extremely important. Variable naming rules. Now, variable names should never start with a number. So I cannot create a variable like one number. See, JavaScript itself is throwing an error. This is a squiggly line, and if I'll simply bring my mouse here, it simply is telling me an identifier or keyword cannot immediately follow a numeric literal. So JavaScript is throwing an error here. I cannot have a variable name that starts with one. I can have one, but anywhere, but it should never start with one like this. So I can do this also. This is also fine. Even this is also fine, but it should never start with one. For another example could be 3 years. This is also an invalid variable name. So I'll simply comment it out. Okay. So variable names can only contain what? It can only contain letters. It can also contain numbers. It can contain underscores as I was showing you, but we should never use underscores. Why? Because we should always go with this camel casing. But in Python language, somebody was asking me about Python. In Python, it is something which is very common. So this is something which is valid in Python, but I won't say it is invalid in JavaScript, but not a very right approach, because in JavaScript we go with this approach. In Python, we go with underscore. We don't use this kind of camel casing in Python. Okay. So, and yeah, we cannot use reserved JavaScript keywords. For example, these are some keywords in JavaScript. This let is a keyword, const is a keyword, where is a keyword. So if you do something like this, let const equal to 5, makes no sense, right? So this is the variable name. So you cannot use a JavaScript keyword like let, var, and const. You can use const one, but it makes no sense. Nobody will understand what is this variable actually used for. So always try to use meaningful name. For example, if I want to store a name, ideally you should use something like this. First name equal to, let's say, Piyush. So this variable name clearly is telling me, or anyone who is reading this code, that this variable name should ideally hold the first name of any person. Okay. So we should never use keywords, and yeah, never ever use uppercase letter for creating a variable name. For example, something like this. This is reserved for creating classes in JavaScript. That will be covered. This is an advanced topic that will be covering maybe after 1 or 2 weeks, right? But not as of now, especially when we are learning JavaScript from the scratch. So make sure that variable names are very much descriptive, and variable names that are all in uppercase are used for constants. For example, right? I was talking about constants. How can I do? So I've created this variable called pi, right? With this value. Ideally, I should not create it like this. Ideally, I should do like this, capital Pi. Now, this capital complete variable name in caps is clearly telling me and anyone who's reading the code that this is a constant variable. So it is kind of highlighter actually. Anyone can understand, right? So this is how we create constants. So let and const were introduced in ES6 or ES 2015, and they're a part of modern JavaScript. And var keyword is the old way of declaring variables. And yeah, we can even declare an empty variable like this. For example, let year. So this is like an empty variable. Okay. So I can do something like this, which is an empty variable. And it is, if I want to create a constant variable, it means it is not supposed to change. For example, I can do something like this, const birth year equal to 1991. Okay. And I cannot change the value of this, right? And it gives me an error. So as a best practice, always use const and only use let when you are sure that the variable needs to change at some point in future. And we should have as little variable mutations or changes as possible just to avoid bugs. Okay. And we should never use this var way of declaring the variables. So these are the three ways, right? And I'm pretty sure that you must have understood. Now all you should do is just a little bit of practice. And yeah, there's one more way of declaring variables. Not a lot of people are aware of this particular thing, but this is possible. I can create a variable even without using let, var, and const. How do I create it? Simply use variable name like this. This is the variable name, and I'm using equal to, and I'm passing some value like this. Okay. This. See, I've created a variable called last name and I'm directly sending this value, but I have not used any let, var, or const. So this is a very terrible way of creating a variable. Ideally, you should never ever use it, but something to be aware of. So how do I know this variable is actually created? Simply use this variable name, and it shows me this value, which is Gupta, right? So we have just learned some basics of JavaScript actually. So this is what I wanted to cover yesterday. Somehow I couldn't cover it, but that's okay. And now I'll move on to the next topic, which is what? How to model data efficiently. So now we'll be talking about some data types in JavaScript. So if we talk about the basic data types in JavaScript, what are these types? This is very, very important to understand, right? So we have something called as primitive types in JavaScript. What are these types? So any value in JavaScript will either be a number, it can be a string, it can be a boolean. Don't worry if you're not understanding it for now, I'll be giving you detailed examples for all of them, right? And then we have a value which is called as null, and finally we have something called as undefined. Okay, and then technically there are two more data types, which is what? Symbol and begint. But we are not going to learn these two data types. Why? Because they are not used very frequently, but something to be aware of. So I'll start with this boolean. Why? Because it is extremely simple. What do I mean by boolean? This is there in Java and JavaScript and in any major programming language, in Python also. So what are booleans? Booleans are simply true or falsy values. So if you want to represent something as true, truthy, or falsy values, you can store it as a boolean value. For example, let me give a very simple use case. Let's say I want to create a variable called is logged in. So again, I'm using lower camel case, right? And I'm storing this value as true. And notice that it is all in lowercase, and I should never use quotes or something. So this is actually a true or truthy value in JavaScript, right? So this is how we create a value. Another example could be, let's say I'm creating a variable called game over, and I'm assigning this value called false to this variable called game over using the assignment operator equal to. So yeah, how do we read it? Whatever is there on the right hand side of equal to is going to be assigned to this thing on the left. So this is how this value false is going to be assigned to this variable called game over. This is how it is read. And booleans are simply true or falsy values, or we can say yes or no, or maybe 1 or 0. But it is always represented in JavaScript as either true and false. So in Boolean, it has only two values, either true or false. It can never have a third value. But in the case of numbers, it can have infinite number of values, all the negative numbers and all the positive numbers. But in the case of Boolean, it has just two values, either true or false. Right? Now, let us learn something that is again very important with JavaScript, and that is variables can change type, which is something little weird thing in JavaScript. And yeah, this, if you are from Java background, you know that it is not at all possible to change the data type in Java, but possible in JavaScript. So what do I mean by this? It is very simple. Let's say I'm creating a variable called num donuts. Let's say I'm a sweet eating person. Okay, and say I'm actually assigning this value of 12. Now, what do I mean by this? I'm creating a variable called num donuts and I'm assigning this value of 12. Can I do something like this? Num donuts, and this time I'm changing its value, but I'm not changing its value to another number. I'm actually changing its value to another type. For example, I'm assigning it a value of as number, or sorry, as a string, which is what? Piyush or anything. So this is absolutely possible and legal in JavaScript, but this is very weird. Ideally, we should never do something like this. So in this particular case, if I want to do something like this, ideally I should create a separate variable so that it should not cause any confusion. So this is actually possible in JavaScript. And again, I can do something like this. Num donuts. I'm again assigning it another value, for example, 19. So this is very much valid in JavaScript, but ideally you would never want to do this. Okay, and then I'll just give you some very high level idea about TypeScript. So some of you might be hearing about this TypeScript language. So ideally, TypeScript is not actually a language, it is just a wrapper around JavaScript. Why do we have TypeScript? Because we have so many issues with JavaScript like this. So that TypeScript is actually a stricter form of JavaScript. So that is actually TypeScript. So if you learn JavaScript, right, 99% TypeScript you have actually learned, and it is very, very simple, right? It is stricter form of JavaScript. And then we'll be talking about another data type called as strings now. So Boolean is something that we have just learned, and we have seen few examples, right? And now we'll be talking about strings. And yeah, whatever data types I'm talking about here, this is something that we use very frequently in Cypress throughout. So this is something that this concept should be very much clear. Yeah, they are very, very simple concepts, but still I really want you to practice. So there's no substitute for practice. Okay, so we are talking about strings now. What are strings basically? Strings are basically a pieces of text or strings of characters. And how do we create string? We wrap them in quotes. What kind of quotes? Either we can use single quotes or double quotes or backticks. Before I learned JavaScript, I never knew what were backticks. So this is a special key on your keyboard, whether it is Mac machine or whether it is a Windows machine. We all have this backtick key. Can someone please tell me where is this backtick key on your keyboard? Anyone? I would like to hear from you. Anyone who can tell me what is this backtick key? Can someone tell me? Or no one is aware? No?
No
Okay.
idea.
Okay. So if you see right below your escape key, you will have something which is called as a backtick key. So this is the backtick key. I'll show you. This one.
That okay.
This is called as backtick. This is not a regular quote. This is a regular quote, single quote. This is a regular double quote. But this is backtick key just below the escape key. So in
Right.
JavaScript, you can create string using single quote or double quote. Oh, I forgot to write double quote here. Yeah. So either single quote or double quote or backticks. And we'll be covering a lot of examples, so your concepts will get cleared for sure. Let me give you a simple example. Let me create a variable called first name. I'm not sure if I've used it before, so let me call it first name one. Somebody is not muted. Okay, I'll just. Okay. Shiba, can you please mute her? Right. So I'll come here. So I'm creating a variable called first name one, and I'm assigning it a value. So I was telling you either I can use single quote or double quote or backtick. So for now, let me use double quotes. Let me call it Ziggy. So I can use these double quotes. So if I'll remove these double quotes, JavaScript will get confused. Then it is going to assume that this is a variable name. So if you see this thing without single quote or double quote or backtick, it means it is actually a variable. So in order to make it as a string, wrap it inside double quotes. So this is one example. Another example, I can create a long string. For example, please do not feed the fish, for example. So this is a longer string, again wrapped inside the double quotes, right? I can create one more. For example, let animal equal to octopus. And see, this time, oh, I've used, yeah, let animal equal to octopus. And see, this time I'm using single quote. So this is completely your call. You can go with single quote. That is absolutely valid in JavaScript. And again, you can use double quote also. That is also valid in JavaScript. But this is not a valid string. So I'm writing it bad string. So I'm starting with double quote, but I'm ending a single quote. This is not valid in JavaScript. For example, I do something like this. This is wrong string. So why it is giving an error? Because I'm starting with double quote and ending with single quote. Similarly, I can end with double quote and start with single quote. Again, this is not valid. So if I'm starting with single quote, I should end with single quote. Or if I'm starting with double quote, I should end with double quote. And this is something that we'll be using very frequently in Cypress, right? So this is where a lot of people get confused. So always go with consistent naming convention. Use, if you're starting with double quote, end with double quote, or if you're starting with single quote, end with single quote. Okay. And there's one more way. For example, let last name. I can even use these backticks to create a string. See, it is valid in JavaScript and it is not at all throwing an error, right? So beauty of this backticks is we can even use single quote inside. For example, I can do something like this. I can use even double quote inside. I can use single quote inside. So this backticks is very, very flexible, unlike the single quote and double quote. But as a as a rule of thumb, we either go with single quote or double quote. But this is something that is also very frequently used in JavaScript. I'll be covering some good number of examples that is going to clear a concept like anything. Okay, so and then we have an operator called type of. Looks like somebody is muted.
Piyush,
Yes, Nick,
Gaurav.
your name is showing as Nick. So okay, you're Gaurav.
Yeah,
Yes, Gaurav, tell me.
can you please go to that tab?
Sorry, your voice is not clear. Can you please bring your earphone closer to your mouth?
Can you go to the that tab, previous tab?
Okay, you mean this one?
Yep.
Yeah.
So what I was asking, you have put let, right? So here also
Mhm.
you can use const.
Correct. You can use const also. Not an issue. But here, but I was just okay. So the purpose of this particular code is just to make you aware about strings. This is not about let or const. So it doesn't matter whether you use let here or const here. Ideally, we should always go with const if we are sure that our variable name is not going to change. But if we think that our variable name might change in the future, then go with let. Okay, I
Okay,
hope this
understood.
particular part
Yep.
is clear.
Yes, yes.
And
Perfect.
like we are creating string here, but
Yes,
we
yes.
are using the keyword let here.
Right. So we can of
So
course use let with strings, not an issue. We can use let. We can even use var also for strings. Let constant var.
okay.
Yeah. So looks like you are getting confused. Please ask me if you have any questions.
Yeah, like in other language, I saw that if we are creating any string, like we have to select the string there, like string and then variable name in the code.
Okay. Any particular language you're talking
Like
about?
in Java we use string class to declare the string.
This is how we create a variable in Java actually. String.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is capital S here actually.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this is how we create in Java. But in JavaScript,
Yes.
we don't have this type. Right. As
Okay.
I was telling you, we can use only let and or const or var. So Java and JavaScript are very different. And yeah, I understand some people who are from specifically from Java background, they especially get a lot confused. Why? Because they are still thinking from Java point of view. And
Mhm.
JavaScript is very different.
Okay. And one more question, like
Mhm.
we have JavaScript object notation like JSON. JavaScript and JSON is same or these are different?
Okay, so JSON is something that is language independent basically. So JSON is something that you can use with Java, JavaScript, Python. Okay, so
Okay.
in my API testing class, I'll be talking in depth about JSON actually. So you will not don't worry about JSON. And since a lot of people are beginners right now, I'm not talking about JSON. But for now, just understand that JSON is something that is completely language independent. What do I mean by this? This JSON can be used with Java or JavaScript or Python. Why? Because it is language independent. That is why we use this JSON specifically when we talk about firing APIs. When we talk about API payload. Why?
Mhm.
Because it is completely language independent. Getting?
Okay. Okay.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it is different from the JavaScript.
Oh, yes, absolutely. JavaScript is a language. JSON is something that is completely different. It is not a language. Okay?
Okay.
Right. So let me move on and I'll show you something. So let's say I have a value, say, which is 80. And I want to find out. I know that this is actually a number. Why? Because it is not wrapped inside single quote or double quote or backticks. But the moment I wrap it, even a number inside these single quote or double quotes, it is turned into a string. So this I'll show you here. So 80 is a number while 80 inside double quote is actually a string. But how do I know for sure it is actually a string? For that, JavaScript provides an operator called typeof, which clearly tells me what is the type of a variable or a value. See, whenever I'm using typeof and I use a space and then I'm passing the value, which is this, it gives me a return type, which is string, also wrapped inside single quote. Okay, and if I do something like this, typeof space, I'm using 90 now. But since this time I'm not using single quote or double quote, it is actually a number. So this is how we can find out the data type of any value. And this is something that is extremely useful. Sometimes you fire a DB query, right, and you get some value, right, and then you want to check if it is actually a string or if it is a number. How you can do that? You can simply use this type of operator. So this is something that is extremely handy, right? And one more thing we can use, as I was telling you, inside backticks, I can use both the single quote as well as the double quote. But in single quote and double quote, I can also use the same. So inside single quote and double quote, I can do like this. So I can create a string like this. He said, comma, I can use double quote here. So this is perfectly valid in JavaScript. Why? As long as I'm starting with single quote and ending with single quote, doesn't matter. I can use double quote inside. Not at all an issue here, right? I can use any number of double quotes. Okay, so this is possible. Similarly, I can create one more string like this. This time I'm starting with double quote and ending with double quote. In that case, I can use anything. For example, he said single quote LOL like this. I can use as many single quotes as possible. So again, this is also valid in JavaScript, right? So as a rule of thumb, always make sure that whichever quote you are using at the start, always end with that quote. If it is single quote here. If it is double quote, then double quote here. Okay, but we cannot use a double quote inside a double quote like this. So if I have a name like Ziggy, can I use another double quote here? No. JavaScript will get confused. So ideally, this is my starting quote and this is my ending quote. But if I'll use one more quote like this, JavaScript will think this double quote as the ending double quote. So what is this double quote then? This is where the problem is. So we should never use something like this. But there's a way around. We can use some escape characters. But this is something that we should never use like this. Okay, so we have something called a string concatenation. String concatenation. Okay, so I'll show you what is the meaning of string concatenation. Let's say I have a string called hi and I'm trying to add this one to it. Any guesses what should be the output? Is it going to throw an error or is it going to work? How do I know? I can show you like this. Console.log of like this. So this time, instead of running my code in the browser, I'm going to show you how do we run the code right inside of VS Code. For that, I have an extension, right? As of now, I've not taught you about extension. So there's this particular extension called CodeRunner. So you simply click on this, which is the extensions tab. Inside this extension tab, simply type this CodeRunner by Junhan, and if you see, it has got how many? I think 33 million downloads, which is a very, very famous extension. What it does is it simply lets you, it brings you this play icon and you can select any JavaScript code and it is going to run it. So even though I'm having so much of lines of JavaScript code here, all I can do is if I'm not selecting anything and if I'll simply run it, it is going to execute the entire file. But suppose if I want to run only this particular piece of code, I can select it and I can simply click on this play button and see I get this output as high one. What is the meaning of this? It means I'm concatenating or joining this string with this number, and this number is actually turned into a string and then it is joined. So looks like somebody's unmuted. I'll mute it. Okay, so I'll come back here. So this is called a string concatenation. It means joining two strings or one string with a number. So this number gets converted to a string and then it gets joined with this word high so that it becomes high one. So this is called a string concatenation. And then we have something. So if you don't have this CodeRunner extension, I'll highly recommend you, please do install this extension, which is a very, very handy extension. So I'll click on this Explorer tab so that I don't want to see these extensions now. Okay, so I'm back to this Explorer tab. Okay, so next we are going to talk about something called as string indexing. So what do I mean by string indexing? Let's say I have a word called chicken. I'll show you. Suppose this is my word C, then H. I'm using a tab key. I'll tell you why I'm writing this tab key. CHICKEN. So what do I mean by string indexing? Each and every, suppose if this is my string called chicken, right? So each character is having an index. What do I mean by index? This is what I mean by this. the character C has an index of 0. The character H has an index 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What do I mean by this? If I want to fetch this particular character, I can fetch using its index. Right? If I want to fetch this particular character, it has this particular index. And yeah, one thing that is extremely important is indexing starts from 0. And programming, whether it is Java, JavaScript, Python, any language, right? So all this indexing starts with always 0. So the last character, if you see, this particular string has how many letters? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the last character is always going to be length minus 1, which is 7 minus 1 is what? 6. Why? Because it has indexing that is starting from 0. So each character has a corresponding index, or I can say its position, right? So I'll take few more examples that will make things a lot simpler. Suppose if I have a string called hello and I'm printing, I want to find out the length of this string. And this is something that is frequently used in not only in Cypress or JavaScript, very frequently actually in programming. Okay, so how do I print it out? Simply use console.log. So console.log is a JavaScript method that is going to print the value, whatever value we are passing in, it simply logs it in the console here. But in browser, which is this one, suppose I'm already in the console here, so I don't need to write console.log here. It is kind of redundant here. See, I'm still getting this 2. I don't need to write console.log of 2. I can simply write 2 and then simply get this output. But in the case of VS Code, I have to write this console.log. And this is very useful for debugging of Cypress scripts. So it is a very commonly used method here. Okay, so what is the output of this console.log hello.length? This is how I can clear the console. Okay, my console is now clear. I'm selecting this piece of code like this, and I'm clicking on this play button and see, I get the output as 5. And this is a very handy method. If I want to find out how many characters it has, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this length is a property that tells me how many characters this particular string has. So this hello string has 5 characters. Okay, and I can do, even if it has, let's say, if I do a spacing here, for example, hello space world like this. Now, how many characters this particular string has? You can think this is 5 and this is also 5. Let's see. This time it is printing what? 11. Why it is 11? I can clearly see 10 characters. It's because of this space here. So this space is also a character. That is why whenever I'm using this length, it finds out not only these letters that I see here, but also this hidden space also. That is what is showing as 11. Okay, and then we have something called as strings are immutable. When I was actually learning JavaScript, sorry, not JavaScript, but Java. So a lot of people were talking about this particular concept as strings are immutable. And I could not understand this concept at all. I saw so many YouTube videos, I still remember, but somehow I never understood this particular concept. But it was extremely simple. But then I realized that it's not about concept is simple or not. It is about how somebody is teaching it. If they are teaching it in a simpler way, then I can understand it. But if they are teaching it in a difficult way, as a beginner, I may find it very difficult to understand. So one thing to understand is whether it is Java or JavaScript, strings are immutable. It means if there is a string that I have defined, I cannot change this particular string. I can give you a very, very simple example to demonstrate this particular part. But for now, I can talk about string indexing. So I was talking about the string indexing, right? So let me store a variable like this. Let song equal to, let's say, surfing USA. So this is my variable. Now, if I do something like this, I can do console.log of sum of 0. So it is going to store something like, if I do like this, let song equal to surfing USA. So if I'll clear my console and if I click on this play button, right, let's see, I get the output as 0. So song of 0 is what? This one. Song of 1 is what? This character. So song of 2 is what? R. So as I was telling you, each character has an index. So this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. Similarly, this is 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. If I want to find out this value, right, I can simply calculate, start counting, and this is how I can actually do. Okay, so this is the meaning of strings indexing, and this is something that is very, very frequently used. So how do I access the last character? It is very simple. I will never use something like this. How many characters it has? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is the space, 8, 9, 10. So this is the last character, which is what? I can do like this. Console.log song of 10. Now see the output. I'll clear the console and I'll click on the play button. See, the output is A. But this is not the right way of writing it. So ideally, how do I write it? This is a smarter way. I'm going to show you now. So song.length -1. This is how I write. So song.length is going to give me what? It is going to give me the entire length of the string. And then I'll subtract 1 from it. Why? Because the first character is having an index of 0. Right. So I'll never go with this option, especially in case of Cypress and JavaScript. I'll go with this one, which is dynamic. Even though the string is now changing, it is always going to find the correct one. But this is going to work only for this particular string. But for another strings, this is going to break. So this is the smarter way of writing it. And now if I'll run this code, see, I get the same output. But I should never go with this option. Why? This is a hard coding thing, hard coding index. But this is a smarter way. Why? Because I'm dynamically calculating the length of the string. It can be 10, 20, whatever. And I'm simply subtracting 1 from it. And I'm finding the last index, which is A. Okay. So this is about strings actually. And then tomorrow we'll be actually covering some more parts of string and how do we learn more about these basic data types in JavaScript. Right. So any questions, anything you would like to ask me before we depart?
Yes. Can we do here
But
length
take
minus
on
2?
that tab, please.
Just a sec, guys. Let us go one by one. So, Nick, yeah, just a sec. Yes, Seema.
Yeah, I was saying like, can we do here length minus 2 to get the index
Second
of
last. You
second
can,
last?
yes. If you do like this, it is going to give you the second last one. See, S,
Okay.
which is this one. And if you, when you start writing the code yourself, Seema, you'll actually learn so much. As of now, you're seeing me write the code, so it means I'm actually practicing. I'm also learning. But when you'll write the code yourself, you'll actually learn so much about JavaScript.
I don't have the setup of VS Code. Can you please guide us how to
It is very simple.
set up
So,
this
yeah,
VS Code?
okay. It is very simple. Whenever you want to download something, right, it is very simple. Simply open google.com, just simply type, okay, I'll close this, and you simply type VS Code download. And always go with the official website. So if you see this code.visualstudiocode.com is from Microsoft website, simply click on this download. If you're on a Windows machine, you download this one. I'm on Mac machine and I'm having the latest Mac Apple Silicon chip. Right, so I'll go with this option. If you're having an older Mac, go with this Intel chip. If you're using the latest Mac, go with this Apple Silicon. But most of you who are on a Windows machine, let's say either Windows 10 or 11, you can go with this one, user installer or system installer. User installer is like if you want to install for a particular user, but if you want to install it globally on your system, then you can go with this option.
Okay.
Right. X64 is for 32-bit machine. This ARM64 is for 64-bit machine.
Okay.
Simply, if you simply click on it, it is going to download it as an exe file. Why? Because it is showing system installer. Simply click on this exe file, click on next, 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 whatever questions it is asking. It is very simple installation. And then you'll see something like this, VS Code, with a blank folder.
Okay.
Right. So don't worry, even if this is completely new for you. And when you start doing it yourself, that is how you'll learn. I was exactly like you, so don't worry. If I can learn, I guess you can also learn.
Okay. And one more thing, can you please repeat the concept of precision in JavaScript?
Sure, definitely. So when I talk about precision, okay, I'll open google.com. So this is something that we use sometimes, but it's something that you should be aware of. For example, let's say I'm typing a number like this, 5 point, right? So if you see, I'm currently how many digits I'm having? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right?
Right.
So so it means this has a decimal point of what? 5. So JavaScript is going to remember this precision, right? I can have a precision like this. I can even have 10 decimal places. This is the meaning of precision here. So let's say 10 decimal places means this first 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. See, JavaScript is again remembering the precision, which is these many decimal places. But if I'm having, let's say, I'll add 16 till 16. digits, JavaScript remembers the precision like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. See, JavaScript is remembering these many places, right? But
Okay.
if I'll add one more, which is 17 digits now, till 16 digits, JavaScript remembers the decimal places. But the moment I cross one, which is 17 digits now, it is not going to work. See, it has removed. Can you see now?
Okay.
But in very rare cases, you'll be requiring these many decimal places. In majority of cases, you'll be using maybe one or two or maximum three decimal places. So this is the meaning of precision. I hope this
Okay.
answers your question, Seema.
Yeah.
And I'm
Clear.
so glad that you guys are asking me questions. This clearly tells me that you guys are really hungry and willing to learn. So I really appreciate your questions and never feel that is my question silly? Heck with it. Nobody is actually giving a damn whether your question silly or not. The most important thing is whatever doubt you have, it should be answered.
Thank you.
No worries. Yeah. So Nick, you were having some questions, and please rename your name because as of now, you guys are completely new for me, and I'm still trying to remember your names. Please go on.
Sure, sure. I just want to go to that tab, nothing, no queries.
Sorry, which query?
I don't have any query. I just want to observe that code. Yeah,
Okay.
what you have printed recently.
Okay. This piece of code you mean?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Don't worry about this piece of code. You will get this recording, right? So everything, whatever I've written here, right? I would recommend please try it out on your own, right? You will have some doubts, you will make some mistakes, and that is how you'll actually learn.
Okay.
Right. Otherwise, I'll be teaching you so much of stuff and you'll forget most of it.
Yeah.
Right.
From tomorrow onwards, I will be making the notes. Actually, I was busy yesterday, so I didn't
No,
bought the
that's
book.
totally fine. Don't worry. See, we all are imperfect people. We all are IT professionals. And as an IT professional, sometimes our life is very hard. Sometimes we have to work 12 hours a day. So that's perfectly normal. Okay.
Currently, I'm taking the screenshots.
No worries. That's totally fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any more questions, guys?
Hi. How does JavaScript handles string overflow?
Please come again. What's your question exactly?
How does JavaScript handles string overflow? If you want to print the string index which is greater than the length plus one?
Okay. Overflow you're talking about.
Yes.
Oh, that is an interesting question. I was not expecting this question, especially in the first or second class. But let's say, okay, so I'll show you like this. So I'll go to Google, I'll clear the console. So this is my string, right? Now let me do something like this, song of 100, which is definitely not present, right? See, if I'll try to use an index that is not present in JavaScript, I get this undefined, which is not an error. If I do the same thing in Java, I will be getting an exception. But in JavaScript, it is very lenient. Java is stricter. JavaScript is very lenient. So even though I'm passing an index that is not present, I'll not get any overflow message or something. I'll simply get undefined. That's it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, got it. It's not a runtime error then. Yeah.
Yes, this is not at all a runtime error.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Okay. Any more questions, guys? So Sheba has raised her hand, but somehow her voice is not very clear. I'm not able to understand. So Sheba, in your case, I would recommend please do maybe WhatsApp me or whatever. Okay. Any more questions, guys, or we are good to go?
Our
Perfect.
batches are from Monday to Thursday, right?
Yes, Monday to Thursday. Initially, they were
Oh,
asking me to cover from Monday to Friday, but I especially asked them, please keep a 3 day break so that people can actually, 5 days will be too much, especially for IT people.
okay, okay, no worries.
Right. That is why I asked them. I think 4 days in a week is more than enough actually, so that you have 3 full days to practice everything.
And how much time it will take to complete the course?
So Seema, in my last batch, it took me approximately 1.5 month. In this particular case, I think anywhere between 1.5 to 2 months. And I don't go with the hours actually. I go with the concepts that I have planned to teach. So whatever
Okay.
concepts that I have in mind, if they're completed in let's say 1.5 months, will be done. Or if they're not done, maybe some of you guys are asking me more questions. It might take me some more time. So that is completely flexible,
Okay.
right? And anyways, like we all are going to stay connected on the WhatsApp group. So if you have any questions, you can ping on the WhatsApp group or you can ping me in person. That is totally your call.
Okay. And we will work on the live project also?
Yes. So okay, I'll show you something. This is one live application, right? Wherein we are going to learn about page object model in detail. We're going to learn so much things, right? We are going to learn so much about JavaScript from this application. This is a locally hosted application. I'll be demonstrating in the Cypress concepts. How do you download and install or basically host this application locally within your machine? And it is going to be a very fun experience. So learning Cypress is actually a very fun experience according to me.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any more questions, guys?
Can you hear me or is the same? Because I am fine to hear
No,
you.
Shiva, somehow, I don't know, but somehow I'm not able to hear your voice only. It is not clear somehow.
Only you or everybody?
I don't know. Maybe others can say it. I mean, somehow your voice is not clear. Can you hear? Maybe Nick, are you able to
Yeah,
hear Shiva?
Shiva, actually, you have some problem in
No,
your audio device, so your
no,
voice is
no.
having so much noise.
It's from Shiba's side.
Correct. So Shiva, what I would recommend is like, maybe if you want, you can speak to me on WhatsApp or you can just ping me. I'm okay to answer your queries. Okay? So anyways, so it is 10:16. Right. So time to take a rest and I'm going to teach you more about Java. Right. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Bye. See you.